In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at modeling this kitchen utensil, this spatula. I actually saw this in the store and thought it would make a really good tutorial. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to set the view to OpenGL because we are using a background template and they only show up in OpenGL for some reason, which is just fine. So let's go ahead and start this by coming up and doing a snap to grid, and we're going to switch over to the rounded rectangle tool, hold the option key down and just sort of drag that out, and then come back over to the scale tool, hold the option alt key down and begin scaling it, then hold the shift key so it is symmetrical. Okay, and then let's pull this down to the bottom about like that. I want to match up these rounded corners a little bit better, so let's just change this to 53%, and that will make that match a little bit better. But because we're going to be using a subdivision surface approach, we need to consider the resolution of the geometry. If I come over here and just pull a copy of this off and convert this explicitly into a polygon mesh, we can see that the resolution may be a little bit higher than what I want. That's the thing with subdivision surfaces. You kind of want to find out what the balance is between the resolution of your cage, having too much, too little. And I think in this case, it's too much. So we're going to press the P key to bring up the project window and then come over to the wing menu here. And we're going to add a complexity attribute. And then when we expand this out, we can come down to complexity. Let's just set this to 40%. Now, it wasn't immediately apparent what happened, but it decreased the resolution of this. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's group this and then convert this to a polygon mesh. The grouping takes the contents and resets it to a normalized scale of 1.0. So now when we come over, we can see that it has a cruder mesh, but that's really good for what it is that we want to do. So now let's go ahead to the top and let's grab all of these vertices. We're in vertex mode. Press Shift and C and we get a Y-axis constraint. Now I've still got snapping on. Let's come over and turn that off. And then I can just bring these up to the top like this. And then we're just going to grab each of these vertices and move them up so they generally match the template. About like that. And then up to the top right there. So currently we have one polygon. If we switch over to polygon mode, we can see that it's an n-gon. Let's switch back over here into edge mode, and we need to kind of complete the rest of this handle part. So let's do this. Shift and C. I've already got my Y-axis constraint on, which is Shift C. It's C because that's just easier on the fingers. So pull up to about here, press the K key, and then I want to toggle temporarily to a Y-axis constraint. So hold Shift and X, and then we can scale just along the X-axis, release the keys, press the U key to go back to an extrude normal, pull that up about like that, K key, Shift and X, and then we can scale again, U key. So that Y-axis constraint, it's toggled on in a semi-permanent way. We can temporarily override it by holding down one of the other modifiers like Shift X. It's really, really handy. Okay, so let's come here. You can see as I zoom out, we can see more of the handle up here. Let's come over here and extrude that up about that far. Let's zoom down back over here. So if we look at a picture of the spatula, you can see that it's got kind of a raised area. I call this the business end down here, and the top is the handle. And then it's got these holes in it. This interior area is kind of raised up a little bit. We need to add some geometry that will help us do that. So let's come back up here, and we need to divide this down the middle. So press the N key and then the C key, and it has divided those in half. Now, let's add some more geometry here. N key, C key, do the same thing here. N key, C key. C key just cuts them down the middle. Let's do that one more time. N key, C key, N key, C key. Take these two. I'm just double clicking to select that loop. Hold the Shift key, then press K. And I want to scale these inward just a little bit. So I'm going to hold Shift and X, and we'll pull those in just a little bit to distribute them a little bit more in a little bit of a better way. So now let's come over here and let's select this big N-gon that we have down here in the middle. Let's come back over to our extrude tools, but we're going to use the extrude inset tool. Click, hold, and drag, and we're going to inset a new polygon in the middle, bounded by these new inset polygons, just something about like that. Let's come back over into edge mode, and I can still be in the extrude inset tool. That's okay. Hold the command key, that would be control on the PC, swipe across these edges, and then press C key to cut them down the middle. Since we're in the extrude inset tool, we can use that to our advantage. I've got this curvature coming down here and here, but this is the longer, sort of flatter area, and I want to put boundary loops here on either side. We can do that quite easily by grabbing this edge and just extruding new loops right there, which produce that bounding. Let's come into vertex mode because we need to come to the top here now, and we need to begin taking all of these vertices and forming them into this profile that I've got here in the template. Let's go ahead and use the y-axis here that I've already got. We'll pull the middle one down. So we're going to be doing a lot of symmetry here. And then press the semicolon key to turn off that guide. Then we're just going to come in here like this, and we're going to pull down. Let me zoom in a little bit more, and just pull these vertices down so they start matching up with the template like this until we get all the way down here, about like that. Okay, so you can come in and you can make refinements. You see here, maybe just in terms of the distribution, something about like that. It doesn't have to be super, super precise, but this is going to be good enough. Now we just want to mirror this across. So if I switch over into face mode and I select, you see I've got a big N-gon here, and then these are N-gons. And since we're going to be doing these symmetry operations, we really want to be able to have symmetry down the middle. So let's come back over into edge mode, hold the command or control key down, swipe across those edges, and then press the C key to connect them down the middle. And then in vertex mode, I can just simply take those two vertices and press the C key to connect those down the middle. And then up top here, in face mode, I'm going to select those polygons. And let's go ahead and right click and then delete those. And then we can take just these polygons here. Let's copy these and then press the X key. So we're going to be looking edge on, but that's going to be our symmetry. Go ahead and paste and then do a flip along and perpendicular to grid, which is option F. And then we need to flip the draw direction or the facing direction. We won't see it here unless I go into H key for hidden line mode. And then if you press the L key, it flips the facing direction back. Okay, S key and then 5 key goes back into the front view. Now we want to make sure and weld these. So just quickly select the vertices that are at the weld seam points and then just do a tolerance weld, and those get welded back together. Now we want to come in and generate some polygons that go across. There's going to be some angling here. Let's look at this from the right view. So let's come over into the right view, and I've already set up a grid template. So if you come over to view and then you go to edit grid template and X, I've got a bitmap here inside of this grid template, and that's what we're seeing right here. So there's going to be this curvature happening right here, and we need to prepare the geometry to allow that. So let's come back into the front view, which is the 5 key, face mode, take these two polygons here. Let's go ahead and explicitly delete those. So you see if I go into H mode, in fact, let's come over here to the environment palette. Let's just bring the directional light so we can see that a little bit more clearly. Now, if I come back over into edge mode and I double click on one of these edges, it detects that open area right there. But I want to bridge across, so I'm going to hold the Option Alt key down and just deselect those. And then if I press the B key, we can bridge across to create polygons right there, and it'll be easy to deform those. Let's go ahead, take this edge, N key, C key to divide that down the middle. they're not welded right here, and there's an open area here, which is fine. So let's come back over into vertex mode, S key, so that we can just marquee across both of those. If you're in hidden line mode, sometimes overlapping elements won't select, so you got to go into outline mode. It's just sort of a safety. And then just come up to the context menu and do a weld for that particular pair. H key, 2 key takes us back into edge mode, double click, and then press the 0 key to fill that. And then we just go back to vertex mode, which is 1, and take these 2 vertices, press the C key to connect them, and we have symmetry down the middle. Let's zoom into this area a little bit, and let's do a little bit of forming work. I'm going to take these, and let's come over into the scale tool, Shift X, and I'm just tapping it, and then we can sort of quickly kind of adjust the flow here. Just something about like this to kind of bring these in. This will help us downstream just a little bit. And then we'll just pull those in about like that. Okay, so now we're ready to give this a little bit of thickness and then begin deforming the curvature to match up to the side profile. So let's go ahead and look at this again in the right view, which I'm just hitting the 6 key. So I'm just doing it on the keyboard right there. Let's come into face mode, and let's double click the move tool. Then we can gain access to a snapping value, and let's put in 0.1, press Command A or Control A on the PC, which will select everything. Okay. And then let's come over to the extrude normal tool and then press the up arrow key, and there we go. Now we've given this some thickness, but it's kind of dark from the right. We've got this one light. Let's do something that's going to help us with overall lighting. So we come over here to the environment palette, click new, and then horizon, and we're just going to create a horizon which is actually going to give us better lighting across the entire model. Okay, now let's turn off ambient, and let's turn off or set the global light down, because it'll actually be too much lighting intensity. Now, you see when we gave it the thickness, it didn't keep the original in place. So let's go ahead and replace the back. Since we're in face mode here, and I've still got these polygons that got shifted up, I've still got them selected. Let's go ahead and copy those polygons. Let's zoom down here to this thickness, and let's come over to the grid tool. And I want the grid to be aligned to this edge. In fact, let's do this. I'm going to come over to set units and see where it says grid lines every 1 unit. I'm using inches. We're focusing down onto a smaller area. And so I want to increase the number of visible grid lines to every 1/4 unit, so we can see that there. Hold Shift and Option and click along this edge, and it'll put the grid at the vertex closest to the click point, but I want it to be in the middle. So press the period key and then hold Shift and click on this edge, and it will relocate that grid, keeping the orientation, but it'll put it at the center, which is really perfectly handy for what we want to do. Come over to the move tool and click to deselect. Okay, and then let's paste that copy geometry, bring up the context menu and come down to flip perpendicular to grid, and it will flip that over to the other side. But we also need to flip the facing direction of the polygon. So context menu and click flip here, or you just press the L key, and there we go. So Command A, Control A on the PC to select everything, vertex mode, which is 1, context menu, and do a tolerance weld. And then let's just make sure that everything is welded. So let's come over into face mode, and with the magic wand tool, just click on all of these faces to reactivate them. And then let's just come back over into the right view, switch back over into vertex mode, and then let's also make sure that we are activating the X grid so that we can see the template right here. Come back over to the move tool and press Shift and Z. And I want to reduce the thickness. Now I just accidentally deselected, so let's come back over here and do a reselect. Sometimes that'll happen. And I'm going to move that so it's a little bit thinner. Okay, S key for outline. There we go. So now we're only going to want to deform these. So we have the angle of the handle, which is all of this up here, and it needs to match up, and then these need to curve, and I'm going to show you how we do that. So let's look at this on from the right, so press the 6 key. So what I'm going to do is the ones that I have selected are going to be bent, but I'm going to take this vertex set here and come all the way to the top of the handle, hold the Shift key, and select these. And then I'm just going to take these and match them up so the right-hand vertex matches basically with the template. Then if we rotate, take a guide, which will control rotation, put the guide right there, come back into the right view, and then if we pull back out a little bit, grab one of these vertices, and you can move that until it basically matches with the template. If it's not quite aligned, you can just come up, say, to the top here and grab those to do fine tuning. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why guides are really useful. They let you control localized rotation like that. So now when we come back into the front, we want to look at these vertices here. These are going to be bent, but I don't want this to bend. So if we look at this, if I come over into face mode and select these, I want these polygons here to remain planar to these polygons. The curvature will start here and then come up, okay? So we want to make sure that it's just these vertices that we're going to bend. So let's come back over into the right view. I'm going to press the semicolon key to turn off that guide. So just sort of remember that. Let's leave edit mode and we're going to come over to the deform tool and click that and set it so it's 4 by 2 by 4. Click OK, and then click on this object. By default, it's going to conform itself entirely to the entire shape, but we're going to restrict it to just this area that we want to work on. So we want to leave this alone here. So we'll just come right to the bottom of that. And then here, we're going to encompass just these parts of the geometry that are going to deform. So then we come over into edit mode for the lattice, select these points, and then we're just going to grab these and we're going to move them over, and you can see it bends all of that geometry there. We can zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to take just these front points and we'll move that so that they have a little bit better sort of flow of the contour there. It's very cool that we can do this. Okay, so that's all bent, H key. Now, if we look at this from the right again, it's kind of flattened out here. We really need another loop of polygons right in here. So we can still edit those while having this lattice affecting the geometry. So let's come back over to the main object, come back into edit mode, and in edge, I'm going to select these central edges, okay, right here to here to here, and press the C key, and it will deform those. You can see how it's got kind of that deform right there. One key goes back into vertex, and let's anchor those here to here. We'll anchor those here to here. Let's do the same on the back. Okay, edge mode, and let's just take these right here, go to the opposite side, C key, and then one key, and then hold the shift key, select, hold the shift key and select, and C key. There we go. So that's great that the lattice still allows us to do that. So we've gotten the handle kind of bent and all of this area bending into the flat area. Let's go ahead and select the lattice and the main object and group these. And then we're going to convert this entire assembly back into a polygon mesh, and it will bake in that transformation. Let's go ahead now and give this area here, we want to give it an uplift. Okay, so we need to select all of these polygons on the front, and let's just move them along the Z-axis. So press Shift and Z, or tap it or hold it, and then we can move these polygons. So if we look at this again in the right view, if I press the S key, you can kind of see I've overshot the template a little bit. That's not a big deal. In fact, we're basically done with the template on the right side. So let's come back into Edit Template X, and let's just remove that so we don't have to have that visually in our view. But one thing I'd like to do that I see on the original object, the physical object, is there's more of a curve here. So on the spatula itself, it's like there's more of a curve here to sort of like prevent food from coming up. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's take just these polygons here. And I think I don't want anything to be affected beyond there. So we're going to come over to the guide tool, click on this vertex. It'll align itself perpendicular to that 6 key. Okay, so let's come back over to the move tool and we can grab up here and begin scaling it. So we can sort of emphasize that. Now it's possible that it would do this. I'm going to press Shift and period. It's possible if you're doing it, it could behave like that. And if that happens, you see there's a blue dot here. It's scaling from the selection origin. Press Shift and period and it will toggle to scale from the guide origin, which is what we want, about like that. So now we're ready to back out and we're ready to give a little bit more three-dimensionality to the handle itself. So let's come into face mode and let's come over here, hold the Shift key and select all of these polygons here. And you're going to note if I come over to the Move tool, there's a Move Normal tool variant, but we can invoke that while still in the Move Element tool. It's a companion tool. We just have a modifier. So if I hold the Command key, that would be the control on the PC. Do you see how it's toggling the icon? It's toggling me into Move Normal mode, and I can just pull each of these polygons along their own normal, hold the Option Alt key down to deselect those polygons, and then Command key, Control again, to pull these out like that. And then let's go into edge mode and let's take just these edges at the center and hold that Command key down and move them along their normals. So do you see what I'm doing is I'm just sort of creating this rounded profile curvature about like that. If we look at this back in the right view, you can kind of see this. I really want the handle to be a little bit thicker, and that'll help to sort of transition to this bump up here. So what I'm going to do is come to the back. Let's put a grid here. Now, grids and guides have overlapping behavior. So if I put a grid right here, it's established itself. And if I had I could have also put a guide there. I could have also just clicked and put a guide right there like that. But let's do this again because I also want to move it to a new location. So I'm going to press the delete key and I'm going to align the grid here, but press the period key and put it to like right about there. So we're putting it to that location. I want the thickness along here that we established by that original extrusion to be about the same. Okay, so let's come back over into vertex mode, 6 key, S key to go into outline, and hold the Shift key down and select all of these vertices. I don't want to change this thickness, so we'll leave these alone right there. Okay, so let's come up to the top, way up here. So let's grab those. Okay, so come back down. And then come back over to the Scale Element tool, press Shift and Command. It establishes a guide that's perpendicular to the grid, and then we can begin scaling it. And you see how it scales about like that, so thicken that, and then we get a nice sort of swooping to come to this area right there. So let's come down and focus on this area here. I think what I want to do first off is take and redistribute these edges here to here, L key, Shift S, and you can see I'm just going to redistribute them so we have a little bit better equal distribution here. But when we look at that, you can see that the topology isn't worked out very well. There's a really interesting way that we can handle this. So if we come back over and look at this from the right view, we can scale from this point and we can take this loop and we can sort of scale it. But the thing that will give us a sense of where we're supposed to scale it to is if we put a new loop in, H key, along here, N key, and I'm going to hold the Option Alt key and I will deselect these and then press the C key. And then what I'm going to do now is hold that Command key down and just pull this up just to give a slight bit of upraised, just a very slight curvature here. So now 1 key, I can take this point and this point, C key to connect that. Okay, so we have sort of a visible loop right here. Let's just do it on the other side also, here to here. C key. Okay. Now, if we come over, let's look at this again on the right side. Now we have sort of a visual because we have this loop coming in to this point, and now we just need to scale it so that we have a continuation of that edge. So let's come over and establish a guide that will allow us to scale it from this point. So come over to the guide tool and click this point. Now, something isn't still quite right about it. Let's look at this from the top view. And we can see that that guide is here, but it's kind of going at a bit of an angle. So what it's doing is when you click on a vertex, it's picking one of the vertices of the polygons it's attached to. It's not taking its vector from the combined vertex of the surrounding polygons. But we can correct this and we can make it go exactly just along the z-axis here, pressing the P key, come up to grids and guides, come down to guide, and it says guide 1. That's the current guide that we've just established. Under axis, we can remove the variance from these normal values along the X. So just come over here and type 0, and there we have that corrected. 6 key, and now we can come back to the scale and just sort of follow this line up. We can grab this and pull until you kind of see the continuation of that line right there. It's very easy, okay? Semicolon key turns that off, H key, and that worked really, really well. Now, I think what I'm also going to do is take this edge and dissolve that. And I'm going to connect here and here, C key, here and C key, just because that kind of gives me a visual sense of the continuity here. And this is where you could come along and you could play with it and see if you need to make any topological tweaks and adjustments. But honestly, I think this is good. So now let's return in face mode with the move tool to this area in here. I'm going to hold the shift key and just select all of these polygons and then come over to the extrude inset tool, click, hold, and drag, and just pull in this perimeter boundary, which will produce a constraint on the subdivision here, and it'll give us just a little bit of rounding. But when we look at this, you can see that it's caused these loops to not be just flush left to right. So I'm going to come over here with the move tool in edge mode. Let's select here and here, L key, does a loop select between, and let's just do a cleanup dissolve, and that corrects that. Now all we need to do is select this edge, N key, C key, 1 key, and then take these 2 points, C key, and we'll do the same thing here, C key, and we've gotten that corrected. Let's come in and sort of dice this up a little bit. This will prepare for adding the circles in a little bit downstream. Come into edge mode, move tool, N key, C key, do the same thing here, N key, C key, and I'm going to take both of these, K key and then Shift X. Let's just scale these in just a little bit like that. 1 key, and then take these 2 vertices and connect them. Okay, so there we go. Let's do one more N key, but you see this one goes way up above. Let's take a look at what that does here. We don't need to really worry about here because we're going to end up removing all of this, but I don't want that loop to continue all the way up. So let's come from here to here, N key. So when you select those 2 edges and you do the ring select, it does just a ring between those 2, which is really nice. C key like that. Let's do the same thing over here. N key, C key. And then we can take and now this is a quad here and that's a quad. So we can just sort of leave those the way those are and then connect these here to here and these here to here. And I'm going to come over like this. Double click and then hold the Option Alt key, deselect those, Shift X. I'm still in the scale element tool, so I can just sort of scale those over about like that. Okay, so that's all we really need to do with that for right now. But let's come in and just sort of check our handiwork. What I want to do is on both sides up till about that point. It's fine if it stops right there. Let's come down to the bottom. We're just going to preview what our form looks like. So select all of these. There we go. Press Option H. That will prevent subdivision from passing that point. Okay, and then let's just double click to go all the way around the perimeter like this. This is again going to be sort of temporary, just so that we can look at the topology. And then press Option H, and then let's press Option S to subdivide that, and then we can take a look at what the subdivision looks like. So press the G key, let's toggle this off, and there we can see what our shape is looking like for our spatula, and I think that's looking pretty good for this area that we've been focusing on.